It was a really big team effort. It was not just me, and it was a lot of work, and it was a really great team building effort. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is about how putting in work together is really good at forming teams. And so thank you to Kim and Julia and Akash and everyone else who volunteered to make that big conference possible. Manu's song was so beautiful, wasn't it? That was beautiful. And Lucas's just soft touch on the cajon. Okay, so welcome to the Philadelphia Ethical Society. Because there are many new people in the building, my talk today is going to be a bit of an introduction to what we are. And I'm focusing on the concept of deed before creed, one of a few golden rules or central sayings of the society, because I think it's a wonderful entry point into our history and the main focus I want to bring. So my intentions for today are to give you a basic understanding of one of the Ethical Society's core mottos, deed before creed, that's the title of the talk, that you understand the core assets that we have inherited as a society, that you get a glimpse of the North Star that I'm trying to create for us, that we can work on together, and then most concretely, I'm going to tell you about some of the many action-oriented activities we have this fall in the hope that you will sign up to help us reach some of these goals. So the first Society for Ethical Culture was created in New York City in 1876, and its leaders focused on concrete projects to improve the lives of the most vulnerable. Members established the first free kindergarten in New York City, created the visiting nurse service, built schools and job training centers, advocated for the abolition of child labor, and launched ambitious civics programs like the Encampment for Citizenship. They helped start organizations like the NAACP and the ACLU. In Philadelphia, our society, among other things, established Camp Linden, which is turning 100 years next year. It's a summer camp for low-income kids, mostly from the city, to learn and experience the wonders of nature and swimming. And this focus on social action is why one of the only dictums of our society is deed before creed. In other words, ethical actions are more important than abstract beliefs or philosophical or ideological positions. In modern language, action speaks louder than words. The first leader of the Philadelphia Ethical Society was also the head worker at the Southwark Settlement House for Immigrant Children, which happens to be the neighborhood where I played baseball and learned music growing up, at Settlement Music School. I grew up not far from there at 10th and Carpenter, and for me it's important to note that I myself am very much a product of the wonderful public schools and of other affordable arts and music-focused schools like Settlement Music School, Moonstone, Meredith, and others in the same neighborhoods that this society very much supported early on. My parents set an example through their actions of dedication towards the community, towards a common good, an example that honestly I'm always going to be trailing. My parents and other neighbors started a tree farm in our neighborhood, spent their weekends organizing the block for trash cleanups, and today a thriving community garden and corner park are the fruits of that labor. It wasn't just them, it was a lot of neighbors doing it together. Now, of course, as a kid, I couldn't appreciate that. I gardened much less than my mom wanted. I helped out much less than my dad wanted, that's for sure. And most of it I can't remember. But you walk through that neighborhood today, and it's one of the most tree-lined areas in urban Philly. Those actions, those trees planted, left an enduring trail. All the trees in my neighborhood have gotten so much taller since I was a kid. And I was walking home with my mother recently and asked her about how many of these trees did you personally help plant? And it was almost all of them. It was over 200 trees in this neighborhood. And most of the trees in the neighborhood. But she also pointed something that I want us to focus on, which is she quickly pointed out how many of those trees that get planted don't survive, often because of the lack of proper care or follow-up. So the reality is that the common goods we enjoy, our common institutions, our public spaces and public parts, this country, none of them should be taken for granted. They were built upon and won with sweat, and we have to take care of them. To me, that necessity of good stewardship of what's come before, that's also at the heart of deed before creed. So a little bit about the history of this building, this ethical society. The idea of a congregation or church or synagogue helping the poor was not new in the 1870s. But the philosophical concept of a congregation without dogma or sacred texts was somewhat unique for its time. While most of my talk today and our small table discussions, the small groups that we're going to get into, are going to focus on the actual events we have this fall, I want to focus a little bit on this history and theory. Felix Adler is considered the founder of the ethical culture movement. He was the son of a rabbi, perhaps the most important rabbi of that time in New York City, Samuel Adler of Temple Emmanuel in Manhattan. At the age of 23, returning home after studying philosophy at university in Germany, Adler decided he was going to take a break from traditional religion and start something new. Now, he was not against all creed or belief, but what he specifically opposed were prescriptive belief systems, the idea that a sacred text, scroll, or form of revealed wisdom should dictate how we ought to live. He said that these systems inevitably become outdated over time, and there's similarities between this approach and democracy, and in theory, how many of the American founders envision our Constitution as a document meant to be amended over time. He didn't think any generation could write the definitive guide for how people should live, and believed it was nearly impossible to fix ethical truth in writing. Here's a quote from his opening address in 1876. "The freedom of thought is a sacred right of every individual, and its diversity will continue to increase with the progress, refinement, and differentiation of the human intellect. Difference is inevitable and welcome in thought. Believe or disbelieve as you may, we shall at all times respect every honest conviction. But be one where there is nothing to divide, in action. Diversity in the creed, unanimity in the deed." So this is where deed before creed comes from. And instead of sacred text, Adler was interested in a generative approach, a set of ethical practices from which new moral insights could emerge organically, rather than trying to indoctrinate people into a fixed set of beliefs. This was part of his critique of some of his own intellectual influences. He argued that thinkers like Emerson and Kant chose nature and reason as supreme teachers. Adler, however, chose action and experience, believing that it is through ethical action and experience that we learn what it means to live well and treat others with dignity. Naturally, this approach embraces scientific reasoning and skepticism about any fixed moral or political ideology. But ethical culture is not about proving people wrong. It's about acting together where possible, and about teaching by modeling what it looks like to bring out the best in people. Another saying that resonates here is, people won't remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. It demonstrates again that so much of how we interpret the world, how we move through it, how we interact, is not based on the specific words or labels we put on things, but by the implications and effect of our simple and often small actions. This is not to say that language doesn't matter. Right now we're extremely divided over language as a society, as a world. But it's to remind us that often the most simple thing we can do is to show up, be humble, listen, and get something done. Simple actions communicate well. Now, it's not as if Adler just went up there in New York City and said deed before creed. I'm simplifying a philosopher's thought, and I haven't read 99% of what Adler wrote. I just started as the new leader, and I haven't even been certified by the American Ethical Union. But people in ethical culture do tend to summarize his thinking with this concept of deed before creed, and one other maxim, which is important to mention here because it's the other pillar. Act so as to elicit the best in others, and thereby in oneself. I'm going to say that again. Act so as to elicit the best in others, and thereby in oneself. So there's a focus there on observation and a sort of decentralization of one's personal ego, which I think is important there. And it feels a little different than, for instance, treat others the way you want to be treated. For Adler, the practice of affirming the worth and dignity of others wasn't just a moral directive. It was also key to one's personal development. Through the action of observing and affirming the worth of another being, we gain deeper insight into both life and ourselves. The core idea here is that action, experience, and reflection themselves are our greatest teacher, and that engagement in social action is central, not peripheral, to personal development. So Adler was speaking at a different time with different challenges for sure, but reading through his writing, many of the themes are no different than ours today. Rapidly increasing inequality, corruption of public officials, a commercial and materialist culture eating away at social connection, technology overwhelming community infrastructure, only a decade before the Civil War had ended. Indeed, in the long history of our universe, 1876 was just yesterday. We look around today, insane inequality, a broken media ecosystem that incentivizes rage, easy access to destructive weapons and technology, and an extreme disconnect with nature, which is one thing I think we can really focus on as the ethical society with our connection to Camp Linden. Such a disconnection with nature that so many of our elites are ready to leave this planet behind. This means we are going to have to be creative about our alliances. We cannot survive the 21st century without building coalitions with whom we disagree on certain issues. We have to become excellent listeners and discerning partners, and really good at coordinating action. Today we appear absolutely divided in terms of our ideas and language, but so much of that division is because of the disintegration of public spaces that foster actual human connection and communication. Spaces like this, spaces like the Ethical Society, especially in one of the richest neighborhoods of the city, are rare, and we have to protect them. So now you know a bit of the principles, these pillars of the Ethical Society. I'm going to turn now to the basic structure of how we meet and get things done. The purpose of a society and its building is to provide us with a shared place where we continue the work of building a better culture. Our weekly meeting, this, is called the platform, and it essentially involves a space for music, a space for learning, and a time for community building. That hasn't changed much since the 1870s. Either myself, a member, or an invited guest speaker, organized by our education committee, give a talk like this one on something new, and then engage us in reflection. Last week, for example, we had State Representative Ben Waxman talking about an experiment in prison reform. This fall, we have a number of exciting platforms, some of which you can see in our new pamphlet that's either on your tables or at the front. We're going to have numerous speakers this fall that I invite you to come back for, including Jane Golden from Mural Arts and climate activist Bill McKibben from 350.org. That's not yet in the calendar, but he's coming. It's called Platform for two reasons. It lifts up a particular inspiring idea or concept, and it also acts as a springboard for the rest of our work and organizing. So to give an example, on the 28th, I will be giving a platform about the history of this building. I'm hoping to recruit some other people to help me with that. And after that platform on the same day, it's going to be a short platform, we're going to do a work day on the building. Or another example, I know there's several folks in the room who are interested in experimenting with civic skill building workshops, writing workshops, cultural programming. These workshops can be featured as part of a platform, inviting the broader community into what we are doing. As a result of past members' successful platforms, successful work, successful organizing, fundraising, outreach, and strategy, their good deeds, in other words, we now have the incredible privilege of owning and operating this beautiful building on Rittenhouse Square. And we also have a 59-acre idyllic property on the Brandywine River, west of Philly. As a movement with a 150-year history, we have practiced deed before creed in many ways. But I want to highlight two of those ways today, because these are our strengths and what we need to learn into if we are to thrive into the future. First, we provide a low-cost space for civic and socially minded groups in the middle of the most privatized and commercial, expensive neighborhood in the city. Our building enables groups like Philly Bike Action, Indivisible Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition, Philly Tenants Union, numerous AA groups, and more to meet, organize, fundraise, and do their good work. If you have an organization that doesn't have a space and need one, we can help be your home. Now, as the Ethical Society, we don't have to have the exactly same goals or agree with everything those groups say or do. That's part of what a thriving civic space does. It creates a commons where groups' interests and ideologies can mix and challenge each other. But as we look to the future, we should lean into this identity as a community hub of civic action. And that's how I wrote, with actually the help of a couple friends with feedback on my bad messaging, the pamphlet that you can find. A community hub for civic action, among other things. If we cease to exist here, this building would almost certainly end up a commercial or residential space for the rich. Right now, this is a kind of a palace for the people. We cannot take that for granted. Second, we operate Camp Linden, a free 6-week summer camp for low-income kids who otherwise would not get to experience the wonders of nature. And this is where I didn't fully prepare because I really wanted to show you a video, so unless we can quickly bring that down, maybe there's a possibility, but I'm going to keep going and talk a little bit about Linden. There's a great video I made about it. I really want to show that to you. But I'll tell you a little bit about it. For those of you who haven't been there. You drive about an hour west from Philly, and you're in these rolling Pennsylvania hills that as a kid from the city, I did not experience. I mean, this is not to throw shade on my parents. They brought me all these different wonderful places. But growing up in the city, you have a really small vision of what the world is, you know? If it wasn't for the fact that my mom's from Indiana, my dad was from New Mexico, I would probably think the East Coast is the center of it all. You drive an hour outside of Philly and you're in these rolling hills that are just gorgeous. You're passing this ecosystem that just feels like it's totally out of this world. And yet it is the ecosystem that enabled the city of Philadelphia to thrive. It's where we all come from. The planet, that critical zone of biological infrastructure that supports us all. Camp Linden is a 60-acre property right along the Brandywine, where every year, for 6 weeks, different groups, one per day, bring out their counselors with their campers from the city. You know, they run a summer program for youth in the city. Bring those campers out to Camp Linden and have them play in the river, fish a little bit, swim, learn how to swim. I didn't learn how to swim until I went to Camp Darkwaters, and even then I didn't learn how to swim. But one of my best experiences was at a summer camp like this, leaving the city during the summer. So we have a 6-week environmental program that is really beautiful, and as members, we can take care of that space, and we can also experience it. We can go have social outings and barbecues there. It's a wonderful place to reconnect, especially if you're from the city, to the natural world, right? And the ecosystems that are around us. It's a really special moment when you see a kid play with a frog for the first time. That's the way I remember playing with the frogs at camping with my parents growing up. So that was a poor job at explaining the video that I wanted to show you. But I'm gonna try to get it up for you afterwards. That was all my fault. Okay. So, given our core assets, this building and Camp Linden, I think we have a tremendous potential to increase our impact here in Philadelphia. I mentioned that I wanted to give you a brief glimpse of the North Star for the society to row towards. We are coming up on the 100th anniversary of Camp Linden next year. It's been in operation for 100 years. And next year, the 250th anniversary of the country, with Philadelphia at its center. These anniversaries are wonderful opportunities for us to build a strategic campaign to raise funds for the renovation of this building, to increase funding for the programming at Camp Linden, and to expand our role as a center for civics, arts, and culture on Rittenhouse Square. We're not ready to launch such a campaign, but with your help, we will get there. Okay, so this is where I'm going to transition into the actions and activities that we have planned this fall. So you'll see on your tables multiple sign-up sheets connected to volunteer days that we are organizing this fall, both here in the building and at Camp Linden. Before we get to those, let's focus on the 4 key themes and goals that we will work on in small groups, okay? We're going to split up into 3 major groups. And that's where I need my other paper. So these 3 goals are the themes that we're then going to split up into based on your own personal interest. 1, what I mentioned, focus on taking care of our building as a community hub for civic community, skill building, and action. 2, becoming a hub for environmental justice-focused education and action, and revitalizing our connection to Camp Linden. And 3, increasing our presence as a hub for art, music, and culture here in Rittenhouse. And there's an overarching goal in all of this, which is active outreach through innovative means about all of the above, right? So we're going to need a team of outreach volunteers. We're going to need folks who know how to do social media. I know I was talking to Hope. I don't know where Hope is, but she was thinking about TikTok, right? We don't have a TikTok yet. I bet that doesn't surprise you. Those are the 3 themes. This building as a community hub for civic skill building and action, environmentally focused education and action, and increasing our presence as a hub for art, music, and culture in Rittenhouse. I'm going to go through the basic goals, and then you're going to decide for yourself which of these groups you want to brainstorm, and we're going to have a brief interest and then asset mapping exercise in small groups. So goal 1, this space as a hub for civic skill building and action. Our building is already home to many socially minded organizations. This fall, we will do more to feature, connect with, and form partnerships with these groups and others that are actively building community in the city and need a home. We will also intentionally invite people who have different or even opposing views together so that they can better understand each other. For example, doing the Pluralist Lab with Root Quarterly and Braver Angels, and I think Heather's here if you want to raise your hand. On November 15th. Goal number 2, become a hub for environmental justice and action. Philly's known for its community gardens, has many active environmental justice groups, and a thriving foodie scene, right? Because of our history with Camp Linden and our location in front of one of the most walked parks in the city, and our already existing connections with groups like Philly Bike Action and many more, we have an opportunity to be more of a hub for the overlap of environmental and social action, and a hub for people who are really looking for a place like Camp Linden to establish that sort of connection with nature that so many people now don't have. Goal number 3, the Ethical Society as a hub for art and music. A big part of the actions we need to take involving successful outreach, getting people's attention. And if bringing people in and grabbing people's attention is what we need to do, few things do that better than music. Here's a quote from Felix Adler. "Were it not for music, that divine comforter which sometimes wins us to higher flights of emotion and speaks in its own wordless language of an ideal beauty and harmony far transcending the prose aspirations to which we confess, our life would be utterly blank and useless." It's kind of intense guy. So one of the things we're going to need to do is build a team of volunteers to help with some of the arts and culture programming that we have here. On the tech side, on the lighting side, people that really, this is really people like me, people that that love music but aren't necessarily playing it and want to be a part of that scene and enriching it. So, now what I would like to do is to split us into three of these themes. That's the splitting up into 3 themes song. Over here is going to be focused on this first goal, building our building as a hub for civic and community action. Okay, and you're going to get individual handouts. And in fact, now I will instruct, Julia, if you could hand out Akash, thank you. This is the interest and asset mapping exercise. So this is don't move yet, but you're going to move when you decide what you want to be in. So civic and networking with other groups in the building, taking care of the building. If you're already in the building committee, it probably makes sense for you to be on this side of the room. Arts and culture, perfectly lined up with Manu and Lucas and many other artists and musicians at these 2 tables, okay? And then on this side of the room, more environmentally focused action and interest in revitalizing our connection with Camp Linden, okay? Environmental, arts, culture, music, the building as a hub. Before we get into those small groups, I'm going to go into the exercise you will do so that when you sit down, you're ready to do this personal reflection, okay? We're going to move, and then you're going to have a piece of paper in front of you, and it's going to help you reflect on some of your interests before we share out in the group, okay? So before we all move, start thinking about which of those 3 themes you're interested in, and make sure you have one of these double-sided pieces of paper that says interest and assets exercise.